When the Oscars are handed out early in March, attention will be focused on the big prizes. Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress. But there's one less high-profile Oscar category that this year has some very strong contenders. It's that of Best Documentary Feature.
I'm not Peter's sister, but sometimes I have.
Cutie and the Boxer is perhaps the most intimate of the Oscar-nominated documentaries, a portrait of a marriage, of the changing dynamics of a relationship between two Japanese-born artists who've long been living in New York. Ushio Shinohara is invested in his boxing or action painting, struggling to keep his legacy alive. His wife, Noriko, 20 years his junior, who's long put his needs first, is at last finding her artistic voice through her drawings.
Multiple continents.
Also in the Oscars race is the hard-hitting Dirty Wars, a journalistic investigation by Jeremy Scahill into America's covert operations, specifically US actions that allegedly killed innocent civilians not linked to terrorist groups. The film plays out like a conspiracy thriller. Many of the Oscar-nominated documentaries are aiming to give filmgoers something they can't get from mainstream journalism. Often they're stories from impassioned individuals who've made a big commitment in terms of time.
You get a richer perspective, you get a longer perspective, and at its best, you get a real artistic vision.
Case in point could be the Oscar-nominated documentary The Square, in which Egyptian-American filmmaker Jahan Noujain spent more than 2 years following 3 main characters caught up in the recent unrest in Egypt. The director believes her film, which has won several awards, is providing people with something that traditional news journalism can't.
Well, the mainstream media, they pop in when there's a big election, a million-man march, a lot of blood in the streets, but you don't see those in-between times. You don't see a human story. And the most important times are those very lonely moments when that person, that activist, decides that they have to go down the next day and continue the fight, and they're not going to go home. And it seems that everything's against them. And so we follow the continuum.
Mungkin ya banyak hantunya. Karena di sini tuh
The Act of Killing is one of the most talked about Oscar-nominated documentaries, partly because of its unorthodox approach. Its focus is on the men who led anti-communist death squads in Indonesia in the 1960s. They slaughtered thousands. Director Joshua Oppenheimer wanted to understand their minds, so he got them to reenact their lethal deeds in the form of the movies they love. Before he embarked on the project, he maintains the perpetrators were openly showing him, reenacting how they slaughtered. To understand them, he provided an arena in which their imagination could flourish.
I understood if I simply combine their reenactments and the making of these reenactments into one film, together we would produce a kind of new form of documentary, which I've not seen before, a kind of documentary of the imagination rather than a documentary of everyday life. And in so doing, we would answer these questions of the imagination. How do they want to be seen? And how do they see themselves? And ultimately, what is the meaning of this horrifying history?
The Act of Killing is a strong candidate to win the Best Documentary Feature Oscar, but it may be too disturbing for Academy members to bear. They may opt instead for the more feel-good 20 Feet from Stardom, which shines a light on background singers. Among those featured is Mary Clayton, who did backup vocals for, among others, the Rolling Stones, most famously for the song Gimme Shelter.
It sort of tells people that the background singers was the most intricate part of the artist, because we made the artist look good.
20 Feet from Stardom has been widely seen and made more money than any of the other Oscar-nominated documentaries. Its high profile could definitely help its chances on Oscars night.